The first time I saw him, I wanted to spit. I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. It was 7 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday, dew soaking through my jeans as I picked up trash along the county parkway. An orange vest itched my neck, my punishment. And there he was, holding a clipboard and a thermos, smiling like the sun personally asked him to come out. His smile wasn't just happy, it was unburdened. I hated it immediately. I was all sharp edges back then. My voice was flat, my eyes stayed on the ground. I trusted nothing, especially not kind-looking guys in clean work boots who volunteered for this. My mistake at 19 was a DUI that wrecked a fence and nearly wrecked a life. My shame was a history written in scars on my skin, hidden under long sleeves even in the summer heat. Survival was a habit I was sick of, but I didn't know any other way to be. We didn't talk for weeks, just nods. Him offering a spare bottle of water, me refusing with a grunt. He'd try to make conversation about the weather. I'd stare until he looked away. I was convinced his kindness was a performance, something that would dissolve the moment he saw the real me. The real me was a cautionary tale. Then my past showed up. It was after hours, at a gas station mini-mart. A face from before, from the wrong crowd, leaning against a beat-up car. He saw me, his eyes lighting up with a malicious glee. "Look what the court dragged out," he sneered, his voice too loud. He started talking about the old days, about things I'd buried. He said he'd come around, tell my new friends all about the real girl. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a promise of exposure, of having the fragile peace I'd built shattered by my own history. So I ran, not from him, but from the shame. It was a cold, hollow feeling in my chest, like my ribs were cracking inward. I ended up on the steps of St. Mary's, a closed-up brick church with a flickering security light. I was just sitting there, shaking, my head in my hands, trying to remember how to breathe. That's where he found me. I don't know how he knew to look. His truck pulled up, the headlights washing over me. For a second, I hoped he'd just drive away. But the door shut, and his footsteps were slow on the pavement. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just sat down beside me, leaving a foot of cold concrete between us. The silence stretched, thin and fragile. And then I told him. Everything. The arrest, the flashing lights, the sound of metal tearing, the betrayal by people I called friends, the despair that left marks, not just on my skin, but on my soul. My voice was a raw whisper, confessing to the dark. I showed him the pale lines on my forearms, my hands trembling. I waited for the flinch, for the distance, for the polite excuse to leave. He was quiet for a long time. I could feel the weight of my history hanging between us, ugly and final. Then he took a slow breath, his own voice low and steady. "Your past explains you," he said, his words clear in the still night. "It doesn't define you." I looked at him then, really looked. His eyes weren't full of pity or horror. They were just understanding. It wasn't absolution. It was a simple, profound truth that broke something loose inside me. A dam of self-hatred I'd been holding back for years. I started to cry, deep, heaving sobs that hurt my lungs. He didn't try to hold me. He just stayed there, a solid presence in the chaos of my breaking. After that night, everything shifted. Love wasn't a lightning bolt. It was the slow, patient sunrise after the longest night. He helped me study for my GED, quizzing me with flashcards at his kitchen table. I helped him understand that for some people, a second chance feels like a lie you're telling yourself. I showed him that survival makes you guarded, that trust isn't a gift, but a hard-won treaty. When I finally got a call for a job interview, a real office job with benefits, my first instinct was to burn the letter. The voice in my head, the old one, screamed that I didn't deserve it. that they'd find out. The morning of the interview, I sat on the edge of my bed in a thrift store blazer, paralyzed. I called him, my throat tight. "I can't do it." He didn't argue. He just said, "I'll be here." He was outside in his truck when I finally forced myself out the door. He didn't come in. He just gave me a single nod through the windshield. That nod said everything. "You can." 2 hours later, when I walked out, shaky but holding a start date, he was still there. I got in the passenger seat, the smell of old coffee and his cologne filling the space. I told him I got it. And then I fell apart. I cried harder than I had the night they put me in handcuffs. This time, the tears weren't from loss. They were from a terrifying, beautiful hope. We didn't fall in love because we healed each other. We fell in love because we stayed. We stayed through the messy, non-linear days of healing, through my nightmares and my sudden silences, through his frustration when he couldn't fix it. We stayed on the couch eating pizza when talking was too hard. We stayed in the quiet moments where nothing was wrong, but everything still felt fragile. One evening, months later, we were cooking dinner. My sleeve rolled up as I chopped vegetables. His hand brushed over the scars on my wrist, not avoiding them, not staring, just a simple touch, as natural as holding my hand. He loved me not despite the scars. He loved me, and the scars were just a part of the map that led me to him. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to offer but my broken pieces, and he treated them like a treasure. The job was a small accounting firm, a quiet place with beige carpets and the constant hum of printers. My first paycheck felt like a foreign object in my hands, crisp, legitimate, mine. I framed it for a week before I finally cashed it. He laughed at that, a warm, easy sound that had become my favorite music. We opened a joint savings account, not for a house or a trip, but for what we called the Nothing Bad Fund, just a safety net. The concept was so alien, so beautifully mundane, it made my chest ache. But healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. You keep passing the same wounds, but from a different angle. Some days, the shame would rise up like floodwater for no reason at all. I'd be folding laundry, and a memory would hit. The cold steel of a handcuff, the disinfectant smell of the holding cell. I'd go quiet for hours. He learned to read that silence. He'd leave a cup of tea on the table next to me, his hand resting on my shoulder for just a second before he moved away. He never demanded I talk. He just made sure I knew I wasn't alone in the quiet. The biggest spiral came with a manila envelope in my mailbox. It was from the state, official seal. My heart dropped into my stomach, a cold, sickening plunge. Instantly, I was 19 again. I carried it inside, my fingers leaving damp prints on the paper. I couldn't open it. For 3 hours, it sat on the kitchen table like a bomb. I was convinced it was a revocation, a mistake, a notice that my record had been rediscovered and my life was hereby canceled. He came home from work, saw my face, saw the envelope. He didn't touch it. He sat down across from me, his eyes steady. "Whatever it is," he said, his voice low and firm, "we face it together. Not you. We." My hands shook as I tore it open. The words blurred. I had to read them 3 times. It wasn't a revocation. It was a notice of record expungement. My petition, filed months ago by a pro bono lawyer I'd barely dared to hope, had been granted. The legal mistake of my teenage self was being sealed, erased. I made a sound, a choked gasp, and the paper fluttered to the floor. He came around the table, kneeling in front of my chair. He took my face in his hands. "Read it to me," he whispered. I tried. My voice broke on every other word. When I finished, I searched his face for the celebration I thought I'd see. But his eyes were glistening. He was crying. For me. The relief that washed over me was so total, so devastating it felt like my bones were dissolving. I slid out of the chair and onto the floor with him, and we just held each other in the patch of afternoon sun on the linoleum. No grand speeches, just his solid heartbeat against my ear, a rhythm that said safe, safe, safe. That night, we celebrated with cheap champagne and takeout. I felt lighter, as if a physical weight had been surgically removed from my spine. But in the middle of laughing, a sharp, unexpected fear sliced through me. The thought was clear and terrifying. What if now that I'm fixed, he leaves? The old wounds whispered that love was conditional, that it was tied to brokenness. I stared at him across the table, the fear freezing my smile. "Hey," he said, his own smile fading. "Where'd you go?" I couldn't say it. I just shook my head, looking down at my hands. He pushed his plate aside. The room was so quiet I could hear the fridge humming. "Talk to me," he said, not a demand, but an invitation. I took a jagged breath. "What if—" I started, my voice small. "What if you loved the project, the girl who needed saving, and now—" He didn't let me finish. He stood up, the chair scraping, and came to my side. He crouched down, forcing me to meet his gaze. "Listen to me," he said, every word deliberate. "I didn't fall in love with your damage. I fell in love with your strength. I fell in love with the woman who got back up, who studied late into the night, who showed up to that interview even though she was terrified." He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "The scars were never what I saw. I always saw you." It was the final surrender. The last brick in the wall I'd built around my heart crumbled to dust. I believed him, not just with my mind, but with every healed and healing part of my soul. Time moved on. The seasons changed. We got a dog, a scruffy rescue mutt. We fought about laundry and what to watch on TV. We made up before bed, every time. The ordinary, beautiful business of building a life. Last spring, on a random Tuesday evening, we were walking that dog by the same county parkway where we'd met. The orange vests were long gone, dandelions dotted the grass. He stopped walking, and the dog, confused, sat at his feet. He turned to me, his hands in his pockets. No grand setup, no dramatic speech, just him, in the fading gold light. "You know I love you," he said, as simply as stating a fact of the universe. "I know," I said, smiling. "And you know I'm staying, through everything, through all the spirals, through all the good Tuesdays and the bad ones. I know that too." He nodded, like that was all the confirmation he needed. Then he got down on one knee, right there on the grass. He didn't pull out a ring box. He just took my hand, his own a little rough, infinitely gentle. "So," he said, looking up at me, his eyes full of that same unwavering light. "Will you let me stay? Officially? For all of them?" I was crying before I could even form the word, but it came out clear, sure, a truth finally spoken from a heart that was no longer just surviving, but truly, fully alive. "Yes." He stood up and kissed me, and it tasted like home, like future, like a peace I'd never dreamed I'd find. He loved me when I had nothing to offer but scars, and he loves me now, with a life built joyfully, tenderly, in the space where those scars used to be the only story I knew. Our story isn't about rescue, it's about witness. It's about choosing every single day to stay. And we do.